the only being. In his seminar lectures from 1955, Dr. Holmes stated, referring to the ancient Hindus, they taught the infinite being of God, the divine nature, not by will or purpose or plan, is such that it must express itself because it couldn't come to know itself other than through its self-expression. That's kind of a lot to wrap your head around. God can't know itself until it can express itself, and it can't express itself until it becomes us. And so the only way for God to know itself is to know itself through us. That's a lot. See, in the beginning there was formless and void, right? Until it created itself into the material world. In the New Thought Dictionary, it says there is an inevitable necessity that the creative spirit shall project its own nature into experience in order that it may know itself. And I'm going to let that sink in because my mouth is dry. So what this is stating is that in order for God to experience God, for God to understand God, for God to see how its own laws work, it had to create us so that it could experience itself. From the book Living the Science of Mind, Dr. Holmes writes, when we ask ourselves, how is it that God knows who we are and that our little affairs are important? The answer is that God knows everything, not as big and little, but only as action and reaction, only as contemplation, knowing, which produces its own reaction. And then, on the next page, it says, it must be then that the obstruction is in our own consciousness, or from our own unconscious resistance created by the thoughts of big and little, or hard and easy. This is what we must overcome. So God created itself in us so that it can experience itself in, as, and through us, and in others. So then the question becomes, how do we live from a place of knowing that the divine exists as us, so that all of our interactions with everybody are from that divine perspective? My favorite way? Meditation. So I'm going to invite us into a meditation right now. And if you're comfortable, you may close your eyes. If you're not comfortable, you may leave them open and simply gaze wherever and simply go within. Empty yourself of everything. Let the mind become still. The 10,000 things rise and fall while the self watches their return. They grow and flourish and then return to the source. Returning to the source is stillness, which is the way of nature. The way of nature is unchanging. Knowing constancy is insight. Not knowing constancy leads to disaster. Knowing constancy, the mind is open. With an open mind, you will be open-hearted. Being open-hearted, you will act royally. Being royal, you will attain the divine. Being divine, you will be at one with the Tao. Being at one with the Tao is eternal. And though the body dies, the Tao will never pass away. You may open your eyes. You see, we're all connected through that one interconnectedness of spirit. And I can tell you that it's the truth, and you will believe me if you have experienced it, and to the degree that you've experienced it. And if you have not experienced, you may think that I'm a fool. And that's okay, because I know who I am. I'm comfortable with that. So I just invite you to just get still, as that meditation suggests, and experience the one within you. There's an illustration I've used once before, but I did not have the benefit of this screen. I would like to show you some pictures of 80,000-year-old quaking aspen. There is 106 acres in Utah where one tree exists. It is all interconnected. The root system of this tree is 80,000 years old. The way that they're able to tell that this 106 acres of one tree is that they have done genetic testing on it from one end to the other, and it is identical genetically. I happen to like to watch things like Forensic Files. And there was recently a case that showed they were able to prove the case simply because they were able to identify the tree under which the deceased had been laying by the genetic markers in the tree. So for this 80,000-year-old, and that's a modest guess at its age, quaking aspen, now quaking aspen, they send out runners underground and then pop back up again. So this is not like some miraculous thing that, has happened. And yet it is pretty miraculous that there is 106 acres. That's 1/10 of a square mile. One living organism. So it's not far-fetched to believe that we are one living organism, simply separated by the skin that defines my body from yours. Our job is to remember. And I love looking at the roots of words. Speaking of trees and their roots, how about words and their roots? The Latin root for remember is to be mindful. Be aware. Be woke. In his teachings, Sri Ramana Maharshi, which was a book given to me by Pete back here. That's not what I thought it was going to be. Oh, this is an example of mindfulness, the quality of state of being aware, woke. And next. Come on. There we go. Ramana Maharshi. The self alone exists. Self being synonymous with God, the divine, the one. The self alone exists, and it can be experienced merely by ceasing to pay attention to the wrong ideas we have about ourselves. So if you could let go of every wrong idea you have about yourself, then you would be able to experience yourself as divine. He goes on to say, in the form of question and answers, how can I attain self-awareness? Realization is nothing to be gained afresh. It's already there. All that is necessary is to get rid of the thought that you don't realize. That's it. So what kind of wrong ideas are you holding onto about yourself that are preventing you from truly embracing the divinity of who you are? Do you somehow have the idea that you're inadequate? That you're inherently flawed? Do you have the idea that you have to depend upon your mind, your intellect, to make your way in the world? That's more ego. Do you have the idea that you have to work hard to make a living? That's a wrong idea. Do you have the idea that you'll never amount to much? Or that others are lucky and you're just not? Do you have the idea that you're unworthy? Do you have the idea that there's a certain amount of adversity that you just have to deal with because you're human? I call BS on that. Let go of that belief system. Do you have an idea that you have to struggle because of the color of your skin or your gender or your orientation? It's a wrong idea. It's not the divine truth. Do you believe, and this one's a real gets you. Do you believe that you have to suffer for your past choices? Or do you believe that when you make a new choice, you get to have a new experience? Do you have the idea that it takes a long time to become enlightened? Maharishi uses the metaphor of combustion to describe the different ways in which one might remember their divinity. He says the first is like gunpowder. Boom, in a flash, you know. The next is like charcoal. With just a little bit of heat exposed to it, it begins to burn. The third is like wet coal, which takes a long time to dry out and a lot of heat applied before it will finally burn. Now, there's nothing wrong with any one of these things. If you're the gunpowder, great. If you're the charcoal, great. If you're coal that's going to take a while to incubate and warm up and dry out and burn up, okay. Be all right with it. There's not a judgment of that. Mindfulness simply requires the attention to reality with no judgment so that you can release those wrong ideas about yourself. In March of 2004, Adyashanti, a Zen Buddhist teacher, and Llewellyn Vaughan-Lee, a Sikh, came together in San Rafael. Did I say that wrong? I don't know if I said it wrong or right. I apologize to anybody who heard it wrong, because I have no idea how to say it. They came together in San Rafael, California for a day-long retreat entitled Awakening to Oneness. These two powerful teachers with students from both of their traditions, as part of a larger spiritual work, asked the vital question: how can we awaken to the reality of global unity? See, because that's what it's going to take, is an awareness globally of our unity. Vaughan-Lee explains that when we awake within oneness, and I love the way he puts that, we awake within it. It's not like we awaken and get to it. We are already in it, and we become awake to it. When we awake to oneness within us, we can participate in the spiritual work of the coming era, infusing the web of life with a spiritual consciousness that can nourish the whole and help our global community enter the next stage of evolution. See, it's one thing to say, I am going to practice my spiritual practice so that I may become personally evolved. I may become personally enlightened. And that's certainly a wonderful thing to do. But the next step beyond that is to recognize that we are all interconnected with each other, and that the sooner I share my enlightenment with others, then they can begin to nurture their own enlightenment, and one by one, like a ripple effect, this enlightenment will reach everyone. Now, it's said that there's, 7 billion people in the world? Is that... I'm getting no nods here. Nobody's awake. Thank you. 7 billion people. So, we don't have to get 6 billion people to believe us. Do you know how many people we have to get to agree on this one thought? 3.5 billion. We need majority. But we don't need 6 billion. We don't have to get most of everybody. We don't have to get the vast majority. We just have to get one over the middle. And then it will tip, and people will begin to live their lives in the awareness that we're all connected. So how do we awaken to that oneness? How do we work with the energy of oneness to help heal the wounds in the world so that our global community can begin manifesting power and peace and awareness? We begin with the most fundamental thing there is, and that is our breath. And the space in between our breath. Breathing techniques are fundamental to a lot of major religions, and there's a reason. When we breathe in, we are inspiring. We're going back into that place of spirit, and then we go back out into the world with an exhale. So the job is to go in and come back out, and go in and come back out. Just like our spiritual practice, we go in and then bring it out. We go in and then bring it back out again. And it's a simple meditation. You can do this meditation anywhere that you can breathe. It is universal. Awareness of breath is being truly aware of the moment. See, most of the time we're thinking about what's coming up or what's happened last week, but when we are thinking about our breath, we are in the present moment. You can't really think, ponder, be aware of more than one thing at a time. So when you come into that, you're bringing yourself back into connection with the source. It is said, and perhaps others could give me a better example of this, that when someone dies, that it is very rare that their last breath includes an exhale. That it's almost always an inhale and stop. They've come back into the source, and they're not coming back out into the world. That cycle, in and back out. And then at the final one, just in. Right? So becoming aware of that breath is the most fundamental thing you can do to get aware of the inspiration, to get aware of spirit within you. And it's said that in that space between the breaths is the quietest, simplest, most potent moment. So you breathe in and you pause in that awareness. God is all there is. And you come back out. And you go back in with, God is all I am. And you come back out. That simple practice of breathing. Now, I can tell that any week, from week to week, I can give homework from here, and some of you would do it. Unless anyone in this room dies this week, everyone's going to do their homework because I'm going to ask you to breathe. That's it. That's your homework. Breathe. One caveat. Breathe mindfully. It's in that quiet space of paying attention to your breath that you get in touch with the divine within you. I'd like to read a poem for you. It's about 30 birds, Simorg. Their souls rose free of all they'd been before. The past and all its actions were no more. Their life came from that close, insistent sun, and in its vivid rays they shone as one. There in Simorg's radiant face they saw themselves, the Simorg of the world, with awe. They gazed and dared at last to comprehend. They were the Simorg at the journey's end. A simorgh, it's a cluster of 30 birds. They're off on this search for the simorgh, and in the end realize that they are the simorgh. The greatest journey takes us back to the simplest truth of who we really are. And in this journey of self-awareness, it's as simple as breathing. We all, well, maybe I shouldn't say we all, many of us try and make it very complicated. Many of us would like to say, oh, well, you can't be enlightened unless you've done this, and this, and this, and this. BS. You can be enlightened if you can breathe mindfully. When you do that breathing technique where you breathe in and pause, there is peace there. It's said that that's the stillest that we can become. And at first, that peace may last only for the moment that you're in it. But as you practice it, it will begin to expand into days and finally into months and years. Finally, that peace that you find in the gap between the breaths will be the definition of your life. It won't matter what's going on. It won't matter what the circumstances are, because when you expand that peace gap, it begins to pervade your entire life. In the Christian Bible, Christ gave his disciples this: peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. See, the peace, that's what it's all about. When we can get into that still, peaceful place enough times so that we begin to take that peace into the world around us. There's only one life. That life is God. That life is my life. That life is your life. And when we approach the world from that space, we transform it. Pray with me. Recognizing God as all there is. Recognizing that there is nothing separate from or outside of God. I can know that the words that I'm speaking are being brought to me by the divine mind. That they are indeed the words of the divine. The divine commanding the divine. And so I know in this moment a true realization that each one of us experience ourselves with the divine, as the divine, in the divine, but the divine in us. And that as we approach the world around us, we are approaching the divine from the divine. There's not me and something else. There is only God. God greeting God, God hugging God, God loving God. And so from that space of awareness, with deepest gratitude for knowing that I simply must bring my awareness to it for it to be made manifest in my life, I can simply let it be. And let my ego go and let spirit have its way. And so it is. It is now time for our offering. And I'm going to invite our ushers to come forward and the band back into place. And if you're viewing us online, I'm going to invite you to go to cslvisalia.org, where you can find a little donate button. You can donate online. I am currently working on securing and contracting an app so that when you forget to bring your cash with you, you can simply bring out your smartphone and text to donate. But in the meantime, read with me our offering affirmation. From the love of pure spirit within me, I bless this gift. I send it forth to heal and bless and prosper. It is evidence of my faith and belief. It does good work in the world and returns to me multiplied abundantly. And now, center band.